A president who has often been prized for his political loyalty. Whatever you think about him, his detractors and allies have agreed that he has kept remarkable loyalty over the years. And yet now we see voters demanding answers, whether it is the fissure and cracks from the Epstein debacle to other things that just appear to not be acceptable, even Republicans speaking out. Here's one moment in a town hall in Nebraska with Republican Rep. Flood.
We believe in medical research. We believe in ag research. We believe in science research.
Why are you covering up the Epstein files?
You can hear the roar and the pushback. Meanwhile, there are reports about what Republicans are trying to do to rebalance something that has clearly spun out of control during a political season where going out in the constituent meetings, the town halls, the summer after passing a budget, they would like to be talking about policy or what they've gotten accomplished this year, not the secrecy around Epstein. Meanwhile, Trump's DOJ is doing things that some see as an effort to distract. Others say you have to take it seriously when it happens. The Attorney General looking for a redo of the Russia probe, which they already did. Remember, there was a bipartisan Senate review of these same issues. Trump's special counsel appointed in the first term found no evidence, let alone charges, against former officials on this score. There's also bipartisan backlash to Donald Trump's censorship, something I'm about to discuss with Mr. Woodward, because these jobs numbers came in. Trump didn't like them, so he shot the messenger, firing the labor statistics chief. Meanwhile, he's also going after public broadcasting and suing the media left and right. If people thought this was going to be a one-off with, say, ABC News, which had a lawsuit, or CBS with a merger, well, remember, Trump is now suing Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal, the sister outlet to Fox News, and some people who used to, like on the Epstein case, give Trump a pass are now wondering how far this will go. There's the threats against universities, and our next guest knows all about dealing with this kind of government, a government that sometimes will go to great lengths to try to suppress the truth. Indeed, both in the Nixon era, where Bob Woodward, of course, was a big part of exposing Watergate, to his recent book and reporting on Trump, he has clashed with this very litigious president. That was all stemming from the tapes for Woodward's reporting, including the bestseller Rage. And now we are joined by legendary journalist and reporter Bob Woodward. He broke the Watergate scandal with his teammate Carl Bernstein, which ultimately, along with other factors, did lead to President Nixon's resignation. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner and remains an associate editor of the Washington Post. He's authored over 20 books, including really remarkable pieces of reporting about every recent president. Bob, it's great to have you back on the program tonight. Welcome back.
Thank you.
When you look at this government, this second-term Trump administration's approach to the press, what do you see, and what do you think of recent departures at your publication, The Washington Post, by journalists?
Okay, well, let's start with Trump. What I did, and this is not an archaeological dig into something that was said months ago, but last month on Truth Social, Trump said, people don't explain to me, I explain to them. And you see in his tweets and what he says publicly, these bursts of ego, that he is in charge, he's controlling everything. And as I've watched this and listened to it, I did 3 books on Trump. It's pathetic that you have the President of the United States out there just pounding away and saying, oh, look, we have got to do it my way and only my way. And there is, I stress the word pathetic. Why is the President of the United States feeling so out of it or disabled that he has to say things like that? Makes no sense. And this, of course, is a common characteristic of Trump. He doesn't know what's in his own interest. If you had a friend who was talking in public and saying things like Trump says, people don't explain to me, I explain to them, you would sit the friend down and say, let's tone it down.
Yeah, and that's striking coming from you. When you look at the Washington Post, where papers are going to make their own decisions, and owners, of course, can make changes. We all understand how that works. We've all worked inside news organizations. Do you have any concern or anything you want to share about the number of reporters who have exited? And of course, Jeff Bezos and the ownership have changed some things. The opinion section, they've said they've narrowed. There are reports here, and I'll read from the New Republic. This has been disputed to some degree because I want to include that Bezos has disputed aspects of this, but there is reporting here referring to a previous legacy where there was almost no intervention in journalism to one who, quote, blocked an endorsement of Harris and revamped the opinion section in what they call a pro-Trump direction. Bezos has said more focused on personal liberties.
Well, there are a lot of great reporters and great editors there. I obviously read. I'm still affiliated with the Post. I think sometimes there are lapses. The editors know this. They're working on it. I think Matt Murray, who is the executive editor, is really working full-time to make things better. At the same time, as a reader, there is a lot of great journalism in the Washington Post.
Let me ask you about the FCC. You mentioned Donald Trump's attacks. This is a kind of a sleepy agency that few people think about day to day, and I think that's how it's supposed to be. But the current FCC chief, Carr, has said publicly that he sees the role of that government commission as reshaping the media and investigating different news outlets, and that he wants coverage, editorial, to be different. Do you think that is concerning and an attack on the First Amendment, given your experience?
Well, it certainly is not going to work. Something like that is not happening. Obviously, there are efforts by people in government, Trump himself, people who work for him, who are trying to shape and denounce the media. That's, quite frankly, not necessarily that unusual. And again, everything has to be measured by the product. And the product is still excellent in many ways. But as I say, the executive editor, Matt Murray, knows he has a lot of work to do, and they have a long-term strategy. I know Matt Murray, and I have faith in him that he'll be able to do this. It's not going to happen overnight.
When you look at the way the Jeffrey Epstein case has metastasized into something larger, you've studied many presidencies, and you've told us before that you have to follow the evidence as you go and not have too many preconceptions about which thing may matter or last. This clearly matters to a lot of people in our democracy and has bedeviled Trump more than some other scandals because of the secrecy, perhaps because of the open questions. How do you make sense of this? Does this matter? Does there need to be more government transparency in that case?
Well, transparency is always a good thing. I mean, Epstein died a long time ago. There are lots of allegations of things he did years ago, particularly with many young girls and so forth. You know, when I get up in the morning and I look around, what am I going to work on? You will ask yourself the question, or I try to ask this question, what's the path to getting reliable firsthand information? Probably nothing's more difficult than something that is 6 years old, that is controversial, and I think there are matters of economic policy and foreign affairs policy that are much more important. I frankly think in the end people understand that, and get it. I try to take the serious track as much as possible.